How can we navigate the whole Microsoft ecosystem as part of our digital transformation? That's what we're going to talk about in today's live discussion here on Tuesday, September 2nd. Thanks for being here today. My name is 𝗟eci𝘸𝗶𝗱𝗲. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're a tech agnostic and independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And this is a weekly live stream we host every week, same time, same place, to cover all things related to digital transformation. We, as a company, are tech agnostic and independent, so we're not affiliated with Microsoft or any other software vendors for that matter, but we do want to dive into focusing on the Microsoft ecosystem here today. And I'll introduce our guest here in just a moment, who's going to help us do that. Couldn't think of a better person than this person that's joining us here today to help us really understand how we can navigate that Microsoft ecosystem. So just a couple quick logistical things. We're going to get to my questions here in just a minute, but I really want to hear your questions, the audience. So anything you want to drop in the chat, any questions, topics you want to cover as it relates to Microsoft and how Microsoft is approaching digital transformations in the ERP space, enterprise tech space. Love to hear your thoughts in the chat here. So just drop those on whatever platform you're watching, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, or TikTok. Be sure to drop your comments or questions here in the chat, and we'll get to those as we go here. Speaking of the chat, I'd love to hear what city and country you're all joining from. We tend to draw people from all over the world, so it's always fun to see where everyone's joining from here today. If you don't mind dropping that in the chat as well, that's a great way to start the conversation. What city and country are you joining from today? And that all being said, that is all I've got for an intro. So joining us to talk about the whole Microsoft tech ecosystem, the enterprise tech ecosystem, I should say, is Mason Whitaker, who's the CEO of Volt Technologies. Mason, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Eric, for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so you and I discovered each other on TikTok, if you can believe that.
Right.
Especially for me being an old guy. I mean, first of all, you have to ask, why was I on TikTok? But second of all, just kind of a small world that we both ran into each other, and we've been exchanging notes, trying to make this happen now for a few months. We finally made it happen. So it's good to meet you on TikTok, and now direct here in a podcast format.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. All business TikTok. That's what we're about.
Yes. All business, yeah. We're not messing around with the dances and all the trending stuff for sure. But you put some really good content out there on TikTok related to Microsoft and just really good little tidbits of advice for people that are either in the Microsoft ecosystem or considering being part of the Microsoft ecosystem. But before we get into all that stuff here, tell us a little bit about Volt Technologies, your journey to why you started Volt Technologies. Sort of give us that fly of yourself and your company.
Yeah, of course. My background is heavily on the technical side. So I spent a long time as a front-end engineer doing JavaScript and building websites. Actually, that's when I started my first company, was as a web engineer doing web design. Kind of really got deeper into the programming space and then found Microsoft, kind of stumbled into the business applications ecosystem, was a technical architect doing AX deployments for a long time. So about 4 years really on the AX side of things, and then started getting into project management and program management, and with that transformation into D365 finance and operations, started to take more larger global implementations on with our parent company, Sunrise Technologies. And I'll explain a little bit of the relationship there as well. But in that role, I was doing very global rollouts as a program manager, and saw a lot of differences when it comes to implementing globally. So different localizations and different ways you had to structure teams, and just really a massive large scale rollout. So one of the projects I was running, we had 172 countries that we had to deploy. So in ERP, that's 172 companies. And we got to the point where we were doing 5 to 6 go lives a weekend, because we had templatized and really built out a framework for how we brought the dynamics to the customer. And this was retail, manufacturing, distribution. So it was a lot of complexity and a lot of localizations, but we were still rolling these out very quickly. We'd start and we'd go live after 6 weeks with a country. And doing that with F&O is pretty crazy fast. And so I started thinking, if we can do this for a massive company and very large scale, why can't we do this for small and mid-size, more mom and pop? And that was what, as a web engineer and other companies I had kind of started in the past, it was always SMB. So that's where I always really wanted to go, and not be in the very large scale enterprise. And what I found was that it was the product. So I had always been in AX and finance and operations, and that product is made for enterprise. And at that same time was really when Microsoft was releasing Dynamics Business Central to the market. So kind of all of that, the stars aligned. Started working with the CEO at Sunrise, who's my business partner now in Volt Technologies, John Pence. And we said, let's do this together. Let's come up with a way to deliver Business Central to the market, to the SMB market. So we created Volt Technologies as a joint venture to deliver Business Central to the SMB market. So I've been doing that ever since. So really since the product got launched at Microsoft, seen a lot of success, a lot of adoption of Business Central in the ecosystem. But very familiar with the entire ecosystem of Microsoft products. So from Dynamics, the whole entire business application suite, and the Power Platform, so like more the enhanced productivity suite, but then also all the M365 and just general productivity tools. So excited for everything we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I had no idea that you were affiliated with or had that joint venture with Sunrise. So that's super helpful to know. And for those that don't know, Sunrise is a pretty significant player in the F&O, the Dynamics 365 F&O space, especially for larger organizations. We've come across Sunrise and worked with Sunrise on several larger scale D365 implementations. But looking at the overall ecosystem, you just started to touch on this, and we might as well just sort of dive into it here. When I think of Microsoft, like 10 years ago, when I thought of how Microsoft was approaching the enterprise tech space, if I'm being fully candid, I thought it was pretty fragmented, a little all over the place. They just had all these different options with Business Central and D365 F&O, like you just mentioned. You had Power BI, PowerApps. You had all these different ISVs and partners that were taking D365 and tailoring it for certain industries. And there's a ton of different VARs. I mean, it's probably got I think it's probably has the largest VAR ecosystem of any of the vendors. There's so many different VARs out there. It almost creates, in some ways you could look at that and say, well, that just sounds like a mess. That's just a lot of stuff to navigate. But, now in today's day and age, the way ERP is evolving into much less of a one size fits all, one answer for everyone sort of approach. Now I'm starting to think maybe there's a brilliant strategy all along, and it just took some time for it to really align and sync up with the market. But what do you like? How would you describe, just at a high level, how would you describe how Microsoft approaches the enterprise tech space in general?
Yeah, it's completely partner-led, really. When it comes to business applications and just implementation, you're not going to find a Microsoft consultant that's going to do this for you. Whereas a lot of the other business applications vendors out there, they're going to have at least a portion that they're doing implementation or even continuous improvement and support themselves. But Microsoft really leaves that all up to the partner. There's a lot of enablement by Microsoft, with resources on their own side and support that they can give partners directly. But it's entirely partner-led. And that's especially the case in small and mid-sized business. So in enterprise, you have a lot more support and concierge and things like that. But really in SMB, you have to find a good VAR who's going to assist you with business applications, or else you're kind of just left with just the products themselves. So it's entirely a partner-led motion, which has led to, like you're saying, a proliferation of a lot of partners that are out there. Definitely the largest of the ecosystem, just with business applications, and the largest of like ISVs. There's Microsoft App Source is their marketplace for apps and offerings. And in the places where it is like 100% partner-led, like Business Central and SMB, there are tens of thousands of these apps that are out there that are built on as bolt-ons or ISVs to the solution. So very much partner-led. And it's tough to navigate, but over time, Microsoft has gotten better at, saying, hey, these are the system integrators that you should be working with if you're in this specific industry or if you're in this country, and starting to get better at almost like surfacing up partners to customers that are going to make sense for them. And that industry specific is a big key to that.
Right. Right. And I'd love to hear from the audience too, just your experience with the Microsoft different channels in the ecosystem overall. What kind of apps have you touched or been involved with in the Microsoft space? If you have, I'd love to hear your feedback in the chat. Let's talk a bit about Dynamics though.
Yeah.
You talked about AX and how you started off in the AX space. And for those that don't know, that's 𝗟𝗓 was the name of the software. And historically, before D365, you had Microsoft Dynamics AX, which is 𝗟𝗓. You had great GP, which is Great Plains, and then you had NAV, which is 𝗟vision. And now you've got primarily D365 Business Central and F&O. Can you just talk about just the ERP space and sort of how Microsoft evolved from acquiring and owning those three legacy products, and then how that evolved into the D365 strategy of today?
Yeah, of course. And it's honestly a very interesting story, where you didn't think that maybe they were making some of the right decisions early in maybe the early 2000s with just having acquired so many different ERPs and they were competing against one another. But over time, it really has made sense. So Microsoft, like you said, had 𝗟𝗓 that they acquired in the early 2000s. They also had Great Plains. Solomon was another one as well, kind of focused on project management, SL, and then NAV, so 𝗟vision. So they had all these different ERP offerings. Each one had different things that they really focused on, like SL for projects, NAV for more inventory with SMB, GP for financials, and AX was kind of always the bigger, more enterprise solution. And over time, they continued to upgrade these, like into 2010, 2014, kind of into there. But then they started to recognize, hey, we have a need to consolidate and really create a clear business application strategy. So what they did is they took Great Plains, Solomon, and 𝗟vision and said, we're going to take the 𝗟vision code base and we're going to take all the features that we can from GP and SL and build those into the 𝗟vision code base, and then upgrade that into a cloud-first solution, which is now Business Central. And they made that specifically for small and mid-sized businesses, because people who are running on NAV and SL were predominantly SMB. GP kind of played a line between both, but they really made it specifically for small and mid-size. AX, they continued to upgrade and add a lot more supply chain capabilities or in-depth, planning, optimization capabilities, and then created that as Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. So the only two offerings that they have today are D365 Business Central and D365 Finance and Supply Chain. So that's the way they split them out. Is Business Central is for small and mid-sized businesses, and Finance and Supply Chain is for enterprise. And there's even more complexity around licensing and what the products are inside of Finance and Supply Chain, that you can break out, but that's kind of the general basis of it.
So what if I'm a mid-market company? I'm right in the middle. I'm sort of, I'm maybe on the larger side for Business Central, but I'm not quite big enough yet to consume all of what F&O has to offer. What are some of the big differentiators between the two products for those that might, fall into either option?
Yeah, the biggest thing comes down to enterprise capabilities. So we used to say before, when doing evaluation like fit gap on BC versus Finance and Supply Chain, we used to say transaction volumes and revenue. That was typically good drivers. But Microsoft has come out with a lot on the Business Central side that allows you to have really no ceiling when it comes to transactions. So now it's strictly on fit gap of capabilities. And the capabilities differences with AX, now Finance and Supply Chain, when they brought it to the cloud, they made a decision that they were going to keep further investing into these tier one capabilities that are similar to what you see in SAP. So like a tier one compete. So these are things like, advanced multi-region planning and distributed order management, where you have an order from one country, and in order to fulfill that order, you've got to route it through several distribution centers and even retail stores, to get there. And that's a problem that small and mid-sized businesses don't really run into, because they're normally operating just a couple warehouses or maybe a couple dozen retail stores, and they're not having that complexity, like I was saying in the beginning, of the company that has 172 legal entities. So that's really where Microsoft said, we're going to further invest into these tier one capabilities and just really continue to bolster the product. On the flip side of that, with Business Central, they made a commitment to saying, we're going to try to create the most usable, the most reliable, the most available ERP on the market and make it seamless within the Microsoft ecosystem. So they release updates every 6 weeks, and they've done really exactly that. They've focused on making it more usable, making it available in more countries, making available more languages, making it more integrated in AI with their Copilot offerings. And they've really focused on that aspect to it. So you can see as over time, since kind of that initial release of BC in 2018, how the two have kind of like diverged, where F&O has gone towards that SAP large scale compete. And then Business Central has really focused on just becoming a better and better, more usable SMB product. So it's exciting to see where we're at now. I mean, about 7 years later, and that is exactly the truth. That's where they're at. BC is the fastest growing, most usable, seamless, reliable ERP on the market. And then F&O, Finance and Supply Chain, is now that really robust tier one SAP compete offering. So that's kind of how they actually branched off.
So that's super interesting. Thank you for that overview, because I know we have a lot of mid-sized clients, mid-market, where they can't really decide between the two. They feel like they could, either one could probably work and have different strengths. When you look at Volt, because you guys at Volt Technologies are more focused on Business Central, what are the common platforms that people are considering alongside Business Central? Is it like NetSuite or New, or like who are they?
Yeah, we consider it tier one and tier two, and then you have like tier three with QuickBooks and FreshBooks and things like that. But normally you're thinking tier one and tier two. In tier two, what we consider is like Acumatica, NetSuite, Business Central, sometimes SAP Business One, but not too much of that going on, at least as of lately. And then industry specific solutions. That's definitely a lot of what we see. Not that they don't have the tier one, but they do have those industry capabilities, but they don't have the platform maybe. And then the tier one, that's the Oracle Fusion, like Oracle Cloud, SAP, Finance and Supply Chain, some flavors of Infor, that sort of thing.
Okay, interesting. So on the ISV front, you were talking about how ISVs go into the application and create these different either bolt-ons or variations of D365 that can fit a certain industry, or it's a little bit more specific to an industry. Is that true just for F&O, or is in the Business Central space, is there the same sort of strategy on the small and mid market?
Yeah, that's a great call out. There's actually way more in Business Central. So because BC has more gaps, there are less capabilities than Finance and Supply Chain just inherently with the strategy. And the way that Microsoft wants to enable those gaps to be filled in the SMB space is to get ISVs on board. So when you go to AppSource, the most amount of apps that exist on there are for Business Central. So there are a lot of ISV players, and that's definitely what we see for implementation. With a mid-market company, let's say you're 150 million in revenue, and you're like, I don't know if I could be BC, I could be F&O. What you'll see is that if you just take a standard company, is that you'll have Business Central and then maybe a couple ISVs or a few ISVs. And then if you do F&O instead, you maybe only have one ISV or two ISVs. So there's always more ISVs as you kind of scale up and you're looking for those enterprise capabilities, but maybe you don't want to buy the full package. You can do that with getting ISVs. So that definitely is a strategy that we see a lot in the mid-market.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how Microsoft was one of the early pioneers of just creating more of almost a platform, than others.
Yeah. And it's really baked into Business Central. So that's similar with like, if you go to Shopify and you're building a Shopify site and you run into like a capability that you're missing, like loyalty tracking or something like that. You can go to the app market and you can install it immediately and the capabilities are available for you. So Business Central is built that same way too, where inside of Business Central, you can look at the marketplace and you can hit install and the capabilities are there for you. So it's got that flexibility with ISVs, which is why a lot of ISVs are kind of gravitating towards that ease of use and ease of installation.
Right. Now here's a question from Sanjay on LinkedIn that's an interesting one. Sanjay says, it's a two-part question. I'll focus on the first part here, which is how does Microsoft see the innovation of integrating with transactions with bigger ERPs like SAP and Oracle? Does Microsoft have sort of a a two-tier strategy to address maybe companies that have a bigger, more complex ERP system on the back end, but then providing more maybe industry specific or functional specific capabilities on top of that? Or is it more, are they taking more of a standalone, let's go full Microsoft or nothing? What's their approach there?
Yeah, when it comes to the ability to handle higher transaction volumes, like what an SAP does, F&O is built for that. Like finance and supply chain is built in such a way, like I was saying, the customer that I had with almost 200 different companies, global 24/7 shop, hundreds of retail stores and distribution centers, things like that. You have to be able to handle a lot of compute with that. This is one of the biggest Microsoft implementations ever performed, especially of commerce. And the way that it was handled was Microsoft has a team internally called the Fast Track team. And this team is able to help you understand the compute requirements that you're going to need and the amount of AOSs or application object servers that you're going to require. And they'll actually, maintain that for you. So you'll have your own servers that are dedicated in the data center, and be able to have a lot more hands-on management to those things when you start getting into those, more tier one, large scale compute requirements. When you look at Business Central, it's built actually as an elastic pool where Microsoft is using telemetry to look at how much compute you're leveraging at any given time, and it's scaling up and down essentially your containers or your server, basically the amount of workload you can use, and it's dynamically doing that. Which that change that they made to have this elastic pool, it removed that ceiling that there was before, where hey, if you have 1 million transactions a month or something, there's zero chance you can run on Business Central. That's not the case anymore, because now it will scale up and scale down kind of automatically, which allows Microsoft to be flexible in that space. So definitely in the tier one side, there's a whole strategy around setting up from just an infrastructure standpoint, how to handle those very large transaction workloads. And you have to work with a partner who's got that status with Microsoft as well to get fast track architects in there to set all this up. And then on the VC side, it's handled for you with that elastic pool. For the capabilities wise, there's not stuff that Microsoft does go and necessarily offer that isn't already included within the finance and supply chain package. Like you do have a lot of additional things that are like SAP like features, with separate planning engines, like planning optimization and things like that really perform just like those SAP modules do.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, one other thing I'll mention too is if you're already a Microsoft shop and you haven't chosen your tier one solution yet, you have to look at, well, if I'm already a Microsoft shop, it's going to be a lighter lift to go to F&O. And in terms of user adoption and just the learning curve, I would imagine is going to be a little bit more favorable to F&O and D365 overall, not to mention that the platform is a bit more open than like an SAP would be. So I think that flexibility is something you've got to look at too. It's a blessing and a curse. We see some clients get into trouble because Microsoft's so flexible. It's almost like you need to close off their options at times because they end up kind of going down some tangents that they don't need to go down.
Especially with Business Central, I will say Business Central is very flexible and open. It's similar with like an Odoo where you can customize and it's really configurable for you, but that can be a disadvantage at times if you go too detail into that. So important to work with a partner, and actually look at, should I do this? Just because it can doesn't mean necessarily that you should.
Right. Yeah, it's a good line. It's one of my favorite lines. Just because you can customize it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, 100%.
What about, here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn that getting into Copilot and AI. So Darian says, you noted 6-week release cycles and rapid Copilot integration. Do you feel customers are actually using these AI features in Copilot in daily operations yet, or is it more of a potential value story in sales demos? Like, do you have examples where clients, viewers are actually starting to use Copilot either in the implementation and or post-implementation in production as part of their business processes?
Yeah, definitely most are post-production. We want to make sure that you're getting that data and the security level right and just like a business process right. So we're not seeing, during implementation as much. I mean, we're definitely starting to see more of it, but the actual AI scenarios and letting that do normal business process. We're seeing a lot of it post-production. So in what we call our continuous improvement motion, we have a lot of customers that are either actively going through or have already gone live with these AI implementations and Copilot offerings, and we're seeing real value. I mean, it's kind of amazing to see, when you actually focus on doing this transformation with AI and doing it the right way, this methodology that we've built, you're seeing like 4 hours a day of what someone's doing, just manually reconciling invoices and checks, and they can do it in 5 minutes with Copilot. And they're like, I can actually get time back to start doing the things I've been wanting to do. Like, it's really awesome to see. We're seeing a lot of that, I will say. It's a lot of post production deployment, like phase 2 and more those fast cycles, which with AI, I mean, you can get so much time to value out of it. You can really spend, the time shadowing and understanding what the core requirements are and like maybe what has to be done by a person, so that human in the loop, and then just spending the time solutioning and saying, well, what can AI actually do from this process? What percentage of this process can be performed, by Copilot or a Copilot Studio agent? And then going back and just quickly building and iterating on a solution. And we've seen in like 15 minutes a solution come that saves, months of time a year for companies. So it's really exciting. We definitely are seeing it a lot more. And this is we're definitely thinking it's going to be a huge, huge portion of our strategy going into 2026.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Microsoft is that, with all the hype around AI, all the software vendors, SAP, Oracle, obviously Microsoft, but Infor, Epicor, NetSuite, all these guys are investing very heavily in AI and hyping and touting AI. But what's really unique about Microsoft is the head start it has in the whole AI space. I mean, I feel like there's a distinct advantage that Microsoft has because of the not only the Copilot tool, but the affiliation with OpenAI. And
Yep.
I just feel like that. How do you think that affects the overall enterprise tech strategy in AI in particular?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that we see of why Microsoft's winning in this AI race is the platform, because you're already using these tools from a productivity standpoint. And then if you're using it from an ERP and CRM standpoint, great. But having that data and the security model figured out, that gives you such a leg up on being able to implement these tools like Copilot, where we see a lot of companies where they come to us and they say they want AI. And we're like, okay, well, let's start looking at the data and we'll look at the systems model. And we're like, well, you don't even have like a true ERP yet. Or this thing is an AS400 that doesn't have API capabilities. You're not going to be able to leverage really AI unless you start to like modernize that stack. And so for those that are already in that Microsoft ecosystem, enabling these new tools is very, very fast. And so they do have a clear advantage because of that, because they're able to just kind of enable a lot of these tools. And then they can see how to actually implement them, because they're getting a lot of that like reinforcement, that iterative loop learning and feedback through Copilot. So it's been exciting to see. The platform play is definitely the right decision. I've been thinking it for a while, but now with AI, it's just exponential.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see where not only where the whole enterprise tech space is going, but Microsoft and the way they're navigating is really interesting. What about PowerApps? Let's talk about that. You mentioned that a couple times now. The PowerApps. Tell us for the layman that doesn't know what PowerApps is. Maybe could you start by just giving us a brief overview of what it is, and then maybe talk about how it fits into the overall enterprise tech stack that Microsoft offers?
Yeah, so PowerApps is a tooling inside of the Power Platform, which essentially is Microsoft's enhanced productivity suite. So you get access to a bunch of tools like Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, was Power Virtual Agents, now Copilot. And Power Apps is really the low/no code offering that Microsoft has for deployment of user experience or user interfaces. And it's got all of these connections through their connectors. So like anything from Salesforce, Jira, Excel, your ERP and Dynamics, or any CRM. And you can build drag and drop interfaces to perform certain actions or tasks that before you'd have to go and pull up an index.html file and manually build out all of your web app and then connect it in. It would take a long time. I think when I first experienced Power Apps was, I think about 7 years ago, and 7 or 8 years ago. And it blew my mind just being a front end engineer and having to spend all that time, decades ago now, but like where I'd manually go through, set up an indexed HTML, add the CSS, add the JavaScript, just to get one little like input box that you could click a button and perform a task. Now with Power Apps, it's seamless, not from just the UI drag and drop, but also the connectivity because of all of their Power Platform connectors that they have. So if you want to work across lots of different data sources and have actions performed, Power Apps is just a really easy way to get quick time to value.
Right, that makes total sense. Now, what about this is a little bit total change of pace here on this question, but this is an interesting one from the audience. This is from Perry on LinkedIn. Perry says, I used to implement Great Plains accounting before Microsoft bought them and other systems as well. If I want to get back into the small and mid-market, government agencies and mid-market, where do I start? So do you have any career advice for someone who wants to maybe become more of a Business Central focused consultant and more focused on the small and mid-market?
Yeah, there's some really great documentation out there that Microsoft has on the differences between Great Plains and Business Central, because that is the natural upgrade path. So if you were on Great Plains or you had implemented Great Plains before working in accounting or SMB, then you can go and look and see, all right, what are the terminology differences, and how can I, start to take my knowledge from GP and then map that into Business Central. And there's a lot of things that are really familiar to you. So it's a lot of the same concepts. There's some different terms that are different, like segments in GP or now dimensions in BC. You're going to find things like that. But definitely the natural way is to start looking at the Microsoft docs around that GP to BC conversion. Great Plains is end of life was announced. I think there's 2026 is like the first cutoff, and then there's a couple more leading up until the full wipe, which is 2029. And so now's the time to start looking into Business Central, because there won't be, that Great Plains, at least support coverage or things like that going into the later part of the decade.
Yeah. Very cool. So here's a question from Michael on LinkedIn. Michael says, Microsoft is the company and customer and device digital surface. So anything that touches it or with multimodal observed by it connects to Microsoft. Does that ring a bell with you, or any thoughts around this?
I love this. I mean, it's so true. Like, it's really like anywhere that you're interacting with a productivity tool, or you're in, which is, productivity tools. I keep saying that, like Outlook, Teams, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, OneNote, OneDrive, all those good things. And then the Power Platform across your BI, your Power Apps, like we touched on, Power Automate, and then into your ERP, CRM, and then everything that's covered kind of in the infrastructure, the Azure layer, and then Surface with your devices. Like I'm running on a Surface right now. It's really, you have all of this surface area of data that you're interacting with. And so having AI connected on top of that really enables full multimodal capabilities across everything, which is like, that's the cool part, is having all this data that you can add in Copilot is just a very simple web call through, there's security behind it, but web call through to OpenAI, and the ChatGPT LLM there, 5 now, which is exciting, and just basically takes your data, puts it in like a super prompt, sends that to OpenAI, and then gets the feedback back. And the amount that you can do with that, it's pretty amazing to see people's eyes go, as wide as they do when we just do a very simple prompt in Copilot, and it goes and reasons through all their emails, their Teams chats, their ERP data. Like, whoa, this is really, really powerful, connected this is. So it's so true. Microsoft really is that like surface area, and all of this interaction that's been going on in your company now is available data to use for AI to reason and perform tasks on your behalf.
Yeah. And the purists in some of us might say, well, that's what ERP systems are for. You should be capturing more of that information in ERP systems. But the reality is, no matter how hard we try, we're never going to get everyone on one platform of Business Central or F&O or any other ERP system for that matter. It's always going to be these emails and outside the system sorts of exchanges. So being able to capture that data, mine it, and make use of it, that's a pretty unique differentiator, I would imagine, that other big tech providers are not able to provide.
Yeah. And there's the really cool technology that's Microsoft loves is Model Context Protocol. And that really enables you to meet your customers where you're at. So a lot of people think, Microsoft and OpenAI, that's, the only way they're ever going to go. But Microsoft's decision to focus around this Model Context Protocol tooling now enables them to be plug and play everywhere. So if you're in any sort of LLM or anything like that, you're now able to plug in. So Microsoft is really realizing, hey, let's build this connector that can plug everything into our apps. And that's only going to supercharge our platform. So it's just such a smart decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Then Michael has a follow-up here again on LinkedIn. Michael says, thank you, Eric. Microsoft has the multiplier effect, so must always be considered first. You guys look like AI here, but yes, better. So how do we prove to Michael and the audience that we are not AI? Copilot did not create this podcast.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've got a T here. Do you think Copilot can generate this?
Without messing up the logo or something?
Yeah.
That's so funny. So let's talk about VARs for a minute, the resellers, the implementers, companies like Bolt Technologies that you're the CEO and founder of. How do I, in this Microsoft space, knowing that it's partner driven, almost to an extreme, I would say it's I don't know of another vendor that is this partner led, I think is the word used, not partner driven, partner led. So you've got partners that are out there finding new applications and new ways of deploying BC or FNO or PowerApps or whatever it is. It's just created this huge, massive proliferation of partners out there. How do you navigate that? Like if I'm a buyer, like, okay, fine, I'm interested in Microsoft, but I need a technical implementer and reseller. I can't just go straight to Microsoft. So how do I navigate these? Is it hundreds of thousands of partners throughout the world? I thought I read once that it was like 600,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot, but that's when you look at, including just all of the M365 or the AI workplace is what it's called now, tooling. When you look at Dynamics, I think it's less than 100,000. So definitely a smaller piece when you're just looking at ERP and CRM and business applications. But definitely the way to navigate it, Microsoft doesn't put this out there, and there should be more communication around this, but they have a lot of designations and specializations for partners that really denote, if someone actually has met certain standards by Microsoft and qualification criteria, things like that. So that's one way to look at it. And then there's also the industry side of things as well. So when it comes to like the qualifications, you have solution partner designations. And this essentially means that if you have a business application solutions partner designation, that you have performed enough digital transformations that to be noted by Microsoft as a successful partner. You have to meet certain revenue criteria, certain certification statuses. You have to have a certain amount of customers that you're working with, certain amount of licenses, things like that on the product. And then you'll get a designation. So like we're designation in data and AI, modern workplace, business applications, things like that. And then you have the specializations underneath. And this is where Microsoft says, all right, yes, you're a solutions partner, for business applications, but do you actually know this product? And so you have to prove out that you have implemented a product a certain amount of times, that you have enough customer references, and you can get a specialization. So we have a small and mid-size business management specialization here at Volt because we focus on SMB. And then the layer underneath that, which is like kind of the cream of the crop, is called Inner Circle. And this is an exclusive network of partners that is only given, by Microsoft, that they vote on every single year. And I think there's maybe upwards of like 40 or 50 partners in the business application space. And these are kind of that, top tier partners. So you want to look for a lot of these accolades and how long they've been kind of in the network. So this is our 10th consecutive year as an Inner Circle partner. And so you want to just make sure that they've got those qualifications. So Microsoft doesn't really announce that very much. And you may see that just on like SI's web pages and things like that, but you don't know what that means, but that's kind of what that means. And so you want a partner who has proven credibility in the product. And then you also want to look at the industry expertise. So are they verticalized and focusing on just some industries, or are they there focusing on just a general function? Like if you go to a partner and they say, we specialize in, maybe less than $5,000 implementations of just finance or something like that, they're kind of going way more horizontal. And if you're looking for something that, hey, maybe I'm an apparel brand and I want an apparel specific solution, they're not going to have that knowledge to be able to tailor the solution for you and build out something that's going to, meet more of your needs from like a fit gap standpoint. So you want a partner that kind of has that industry expertise.
Yeah, that's great advice. And with so many options out there, I mean, it's impossible for Microsoft to have, even though they've got their criteria and guidelines for what a partner needs to do as a minimum requirement, there's still, in my experience, a huge variation of quality and scale and breadth of resources, all that stuff.
And that's what we saw with creating Volt. So we always had at Sunrise a very premier service offering that was more like white glove, something you get with maybe like the big four, but not the price tag of, the big four.
Right.
And we really focused on just high quality white glove implementation service. And when I was doing that in the enterprise, I realized that, with SMB, there's a proliferation of partners, but not a lot of them that are actually doing it well. There's a lot of skeletons, I'd say, just kind of in the ecosystem. And so saw a big opportunity there with coming in and doing it right. So there's a lot of small partners like mom and pop accounting firms that are like, we'll do your bookkeeping and we'll be your BC partner too. Like we'll maybe buy the license indirect or something like that. And kind of they'll undershoot the complexity of ERP implementation or CRM implementation. And they'll get you the licenses and then you're like, okay, I've got all this migration and all this integration and how do I do this? And they're like, well, we'll just do your, your financials. So there's a graveyard of people that are like that. And so there was that big opportunity for that. And that's kind of what we do differently in the space is SMB, but having that premier kind of more white glove experience.
Yeah, and more than just you and another guy, that just happen to be that they're just going to go do it all for everyone.
This is complex work. And I think it's a lot of people that are SMBs, they don't think ERP is like maybe that complex. They're like, just load my data, and there's a lot to this.
Yeah, it's easy enough to install Microsoft Office. So how could business be any more complicated than that? Super interesting. And that's actually, you said it really well. That concept of kind of skeletons in a graveyard of these mom and pops. That's really well said. And that's the fragmentation that I think I'm referring to is, you've got companies like Volt and Sunrise and others that are more scaled and larger. But for every one of you guys, there's, dozens of just these tiny little.
Yeah, it's 90% of the market is really a lot of that because it's, if you're an accounting firm and you can see a way to monetize ERP by just, I'm going to go register as a partner. So there is that kind of downside of having such a large partner ecosystem. There's a lot of bad partners that are out there.
Yeah, for sure. Michael still isn't convinced that this isn't AI because yes, Copilot can generate iced tea bottles.
It's pretty good at it. Yeah, it really is.
It is, but Harry has a point here. I've got some moving cars behind me. It's harder to replicate. Although I was thinking it'd be kind of funny to get someone to like fly drones back and forth or something to make it look like it might be AI or get some monkey to climb up the wall.
We should try to recreate this with AI and see actually what the differences are.
See what it actually looks like. And I think it'll be a bit more obvious that it's AI if we were to do that.
Soon it won't be though. Soon it'll look better.
Have you tried that called the Google notebook? I think it's called.
What that? Banana, the new the new video and image generator.
I haven't tried that one yet, but I've seen the one where you could create like a podcast. It'll just an audio podcast.
I think Notebook LM does it.
Yes, Notebook LM.
Yeah, I haven't tried it, but I have actually seen a couple people at our company. They've made that around Microsoft, and they'll kind of create a podcast, and it's with his own voice too. So it's kind of very unique in that, and it sounds just like him. It really does. So it's pretty incredible.
It is, yeah, and I wouldn't be able to tell, even knowing that it was AI, I couldn't. I was listening for those little nuances that make you think, okay, that makes sense. That's AI. But
I had our marketing team actually. They sent me a video and they were like, "Let me know what your thoughts are on approving this." And it was first like a video of me that I remember filming, and then talking about, I think it was GP to BC migration, and all of a sudden it cut to a diagram explanation and explaining how to perform, I think like using the GP to BC tool. And then I was like, it was me talking. It's like, I don't remember saying that. And, but it sounded just like me. I was like, maybe they just got it from another clip. And after about a minute or so, I was like, oh, this is them testing an AI tool just to see if like I'll recognize that it wasn't actually me that was saying that. So I went to them and I was like, I'm on to you guys. Like, I know what you did. So it's pretty amazing, especially with you and I, who have a lot of recordings. If you take all that data, you can get pretty good results.
Right. And Michael just will not let it go. He said, he said, yep, that's what AI would say. He's still not convinced. He's gonna.
I know he's not sold. I don't know what to do to convince him.
Here's a question from Elidio on LinkedIn. Elidio says, is Microsoft ERP flexible to meet the tax needs of any country? Maybe more broadly speaking, just regulatory, just general global requirements. Is that a difference between Business Central and F&O, or how would you answer that?
Yeah, there are more localizations available within finance and supply chain. So that's just kind of generalized, where, like I was saying in the beginning, the 172 different countries that we implemented in, each one kind of had their own nuances when it came to localizations, not just tax, but really a number of others. So there's more in F&O, but there is still a lot within Business Central. So all of like your kind of typical countries that we would see just as a US VAR, like Canada and Mexico and UK and throughout South America and Europe and parts of Africa and Asia as well. They do have those localizations, but there's way more within finance and supply chain where, there was, with doing 172 countries, we had one implementation where a requirement of, capturing payment at the retail store was to have chickens. And had to be a payment method that was in there. And so that was in there with finance and supply chain. So that just shows you kind of the breadth that it goes to kind of with all the different localizations. But Business Central did not have that, or does not have that. So
see, this is why I can never say I've seen it all in the ERP space, because I've never seen that before. I've never seen payment with chickens, but it makes sense. I mean, it's really interesting contrast, old world meets new world of ERP. And just goes to show the flexibility and the power of ERP systems nowadays.
Yeah, that was I can't remember which country in Africa, but we did, the majority of Africa, and there was a lot of crazy localizations, and a lot in South America too. Like a lot more, we kind of in the US market, like, oh, sales tax, it's difficult. You have to use, Avalara, Vertex, or, maintain a custom, sort of engine or something. There's a lot more complexity out in the world when it comes to ERP and business applications than just that.
Yeah. And Perry has a good follow-up here too from that question. Perry says there are many country-specific vendors who specialize in localized tax adapters. And then Michael has another good point here that tax codes are also highly documented, drop into AI for verification, reusability, and conflicts.
Yeah, that's a good call. If you can't, Avalara and Vertex do meet a lot of those. There are certain ones, like, so for example, we own a company in China, and they have it's called 𝗜HIV, and they have a golden tax integration for F&O. It's actually the only one that you'll see out there on AppSource. So there's a lot of partners that have gone and basically pre-built a lot of things. But Microsoft does have a large amount. I can't remember the exact number. It's always increasing with every release. But a large number of localizations that are both in BC and in finance and supply chain. They're really trying to make it more expansive and available for everyone.
Right. So when you look at the future of enterprise tech and AI, automation, all the different stuff happening in the space right now, first of all, part one of this question would be, how do you see Microsoft navigating it? Do you have direct knowledge or speculation of what you think Microsoft is going to do in, say, 3 to 5 years? Are they going to keep holding the line or keep heading down the path they're on? Do you see other adjustments or pivots they make, or how do you predict this Microsoft space will adapt to the changing technology landscape here?
Yeah, no, I have both direct and speculation, and some NDA that I can't say from being an inner circle partner. But what I can speak to is that Microsoft is really excited about Model Context Protocol. MCP is really going to change the way that business process is performed in the future. Whereas right now, really that surface area is all ERP and CRM and actually inside of the application. And what we're seeing is that you're going to be able to work with AI tooling to perform a lot more tasks on your behalf, and leveraging autonomous agents to be able to do things that you typically would be going into an application and performing. So a large portion of that surface area of work, like we talked about the Microsoft surface area of all the data and security and all the different ecosystem, there's kind of a level above that it's moving to, which is what MCP is enabling. So MCP enabling having like Business Central, and you can plug this into any LLM. So Claude or ChatGPT, whatever model really your preference is. Microsoft is being model agnostic, where they're saying we'll default to OpenAI because we own a big chunk of that, but you can use whatever model you want, and we're going to allow our applications to plug and play into everything. So I can now be in Claude and say, what's the balances of my customers? Spits you out a list. Okay, send them an aged AR reminder email to these 3. Okay, actually do it this way because I like Nancy and I want to be a little bit friendlier to her. So it's going to change from you going into your ERP and making these sorts of decisions to working in a system that kind of connects into the things that you already do. So that's definitely what I'm really excited about with MCP, and so is Microsoft. Even at a recent conference, we had this executive partner summit that had Microsoft Hearts MCP. It was like the big slide that they had, and that's definitely going to be a big focus for them. And so it's a big focus for partners too, because we've always taken a typical business modeling approach where we say, all right, let's look at your current state, do a whole Visio modeling chart. Here's like your future state where it's now more efficient and more consolidated, streamlined, and using the new system. And now all of that, there's like a third level to that, which is now how you're using MCP and how your agentic workflow is going to look. So it's something I'm super deep into. Our team is really deep into. We're starting to roll out for our customers. I'm starting to actually make offerings around it. It really is the future, but that's only the next like 2 years is what I see with that change. The 2+ is billions, if not trillions, of agents that are running, and when that happens, there's a lot of things that ultimately change. So,
yeah,
more speculation.
Yeah, well, since we're on the thread of speculation here, curious to hear from you on the whole trend of one thing I'm thinking a lot about lately, just as someone who's been in space for a long time too, is that historically ERP software has been sort of the center of gravity, from an architecture and a data and any user perspective. ERP systems, whether it's Business Central or any other ERP system, has always been sort of that center of gravity. All the other apps and the processes sort of revolve around it. It almost seems like the center of gravity is shifting away from ERP. ERP is always going to have a role. It's going to be important, but it almost seems like whether it's agents or MCP, in the case of what Microsoft is doing in particular, it seems like that shift is really shifting that center of gravity, for lack of a better word.
It's the surface area. That's what I keep thinking of. It's like the surface area. It's like with user interface, and Microsoft says this all the time, AI is the new UI. And so that surface area is changing where, all right, if I need to add a customer, I'm not going to go into my ERP or my CRM and go new and walk through all my stuff. Where they're going to go is to like an LLM of their choice. And that will even change, especially over the next 2 years, just like how we actually interact with that. But it'll change. So that's where the input is. But the most important thing is still going to be the heart of the business, which is ERP, CRM, and these engines that are requiring, validation and transactional integrity and having to be reliable. I used to get obsessed with this idea of, real-time code generation kind of live in front of you. Like when I first saw LLMs do this, I was just like, this is the future. We're just going to automatically generate apps on the fly and say, I need this thing, generates it. I'm going to perform a task. And then it's going to basically, remove the code and deprecate the code. And it'll only exist and be persistent at that runtime. But then when I saw this, this idea, and I actually started, really focusing and seeing how I could leverage this, realized how absolutely critical it is to have a core set of business logic and transactional integrity and a database that's logical and relational, how critical that is. You can't just do a Power Apps for everything. You got to have a heart for your business. So while the surface area is changing and is really, I mean, we're going to see it really, really change over the next year, just with MCP, just way more into LLMs. That is going to be really exciting because the person's business process will change, but that ERP and that heart of the business and CRM, those are going to be even more important. So that's the way that Microsoft sees it as well. Like they're seeing that this is the golden era of Dynamics 365 because these components are going to become even more critically important, even as that surface area changes. So while it may be less users' eyeballs, on the applications, the importance actually is going to go through the roof. It'll kind of be like the engine underneath the hood. You don't always have to open the hood, but you've got to have an engine. So
yeah, I've never even opened the hood of my car to see that there's an engine there, but I assume there is one. But
yeah, exactly. And that's where we're excited just as the partner network, because we'll be those mechanics. Like there's going to be a lot of last mile problems of how do we get this tweaked and in there or context for my business. And there's gonna be a lot of opportunities for partners with that.
Right. Yeah, and Darian has an interesting follow-up to that. Darian on LinkedIn says, given how quickly Microsoft is baking in Copilot and Power Platform tools, do you think smaller partners can even keep up? Or is the AI-driven future of ERP going to widen the gap between premier partners like Volt and the mom and pop graveyard of implementers that you were talking about before?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is going to be a gap, but it's going to be a gap just like you see in technology always. If someone is still focusing on Great Plains, I mean, the product is end of life. That you have to have a new offering. And so just as we've always seen in technology, I've seen it firsthand a lot where I become an expert in something and then, hey, there's something new. And then now that thing is deprecated. You have to be keeping up with the curve and staying current on these things. There will be a gap between that. And I think the pace that gap is created has accelerated a bit. But I definitely think it's nothing new. It's something we've kind of always seen with just the rate of technological advancement.
And it'll continue to evolve and look a lot different in 2, 3, 5, 10 years, but it's the same sort of dynamic plan.
Gotta stay current. I definitely think there's a lot of value that you can unlock just like for yourself as a partner if you really do focus on how can I make these tools work for my customer. And like trying to build a methodology around the implementation of it, doing the framework of how you would do continuous improvement for it and things like that.
Yeah, it seems like it would be harder to, not harder, but it seems like one thing you'd want to do to vet potential partners in the Microsoft space are to make sure that they don't know just one system, like whether it's an obsolete product like Great Plains or even Business Central. In your case, you want someone that knows Business Central, they know Power Apps, they know Copilot, they know how this all ties together. Like you said, you need a mechanic that can piece this all together, not just a specialist that knows one tiny piece of it, because that's not the way that's not Microsoft's value, really. It's their values in the broader surface area that you're talking about.
Yeah, you want to ask your partner, about those things outside of just the single swim lane that they're talking to you about, because you kind of have to have that context. What we've seen a lot in the SMB graveyard, since we're using the term, I'll keep kind of honing in on it, is that a lot of partners will just have really over customized GP or SL or NAV to do things that maybe like ISV solutions that were available at the time just are able to do, and they're kind of known in the market for doing that. And so, or like a Power Platform tool that's just way, way easier than, building out this whole customization around something. And so that's where, a partner, normally a smaller partner, has kind of tunnel vision on, this is how the only way that I know how to do things. So I'm going to put everything kind of into this box. And you do want a partner who's looking ahead at the things that are coming and saying, hey, maybe we could do this in this way now, but here's the way that we're going to actually do it, when this thing is released. Or, hey, here's ISV offerings or Power Platform things that we could be doing. Instead of this, we always do an options analysis with our customers to say, like, here's how we could do it maybe direct. Here's how you do it with an ISV. Here's how you do it like Power Platform, low, no code. And just, here's the trade-offs, all of those things. You really want a partner who's thinking about that for you and not just thinking, oh yeah, the only thing I know is AL code, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Which AL is the programming language for Business Central.
Right. Got it. So what's your parting advice to a CIO, IT director, project manager, someone who's sitting here, maybe their head's spinning a little bit. There's a lot here. We've talked a lot about a lot of stuff, a lot of different options, a lot of different technologies that Microsoft is pursuing in the enterprise space and creating a complete solution. What single piece of advice would you give to someone who's just starting out, trying to figure out how to chart that course and define that strategy that makes the most sense for them?
Yeah, as a CIO, I'd say first thing that I'd like to educate on is you're not behind. This is normal. Like just because you see all of, we're talking about MCP and all the things that AI is doing with business process, you are not behind. You're actually right where everyone else is at in the market. This is coming from the absolute bleeding edge in the forefront of things. So first, kind of take a deep breath there. Second thing is that you need to think of this change in levels. And you want to make sure you are leveling up your entire organization and even your technology, your platform. And that first level is thinking of it as productivity gains. So this is the basics. This is, hey, how do I leverage Copilot to look through my email? Okay, so in order to do that, I need to have my data right. I need to have Outlook for one. I need to have security roles. This is kind of just the basics, if you will, kind of blocking and tackling when it comes to your foundation. So you need to be getting everything ready from just the foundational layer, infrastructure, your general things, just to enable the basics of literally turning on a tool like Copilot, or enabling your organization to turn on ChatGPT. Most people have this stuff blocked, and that's because CIOs are the plumbing is not right. Everything will explode if we turn this on. You have to get that plumbing right. And that's level one. Level two is starting to look at this from a business process transformation. So where can I take my existing processes that I have pretty well defined, maybe in SOPs or in process models, and where can I start looking at those to say, where can I actually incorporate these productivity gains, these tools into these processes? So thinking about, hey, rather than having Susie search through her email for 4 hours for a couple files, maybe we can build into the process that there's a Copilot agent that does that instead, and now it saves her a couple hours a day. So looking at those areas, that's kind of the level two, and you have to have level one right before you can go to level two. And level three, which there's very few organizations who are even here yet, but it's starting to look at things from an autonomous perspective. So rather than, all right, human triggers Copilot, and then now Copilot performs action, now there's human in the loop, and then we can perform our business process as usual. Now looking at entire workflows and saying, okay, well, what's a trigger for this that then I can have Copilot run on autonomously and perform actions on my behalf? And starting to look at that really, that business process model and saying, now, how can Copilot or an AI agent do all of this? And that's that full autonomous future where we're going to see that there's, millions, billions, trillions in the long distance future of these agents kind of running. But you have to think of it in levels. It's level one, get the platform, the foundation, the data security, and be able just to hit that, configure button or that provision button on Copilot or ChatGPT, and you feel secure about it. Level two is looking at it from just inserting it into business process. And where can you provide value still with a lot of human in the loop? And then level three is, all right, let's actually try to crack the egg, which is autonomous agents.
Very cool. It's almost like a mini maturity model, looking at kind of where you are now and where you want to get. And what I like about the way you're describing all this, by the way, and one thing that I think our industry forgets is that you need a partner that is on the forefront of technological advance, but knows how to come back to where you are. Because it doesn't do any good if you know all the stuff you've been talking about on this podcast, but yet you don't know how to bring it back to where the client is today.
100%. Yeah, it is.
Take a deep breath. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's crazy to see the amount of, when we talk about AI or someone comes to me talking about AI and they're like, all right, so let's look at this. And here's my paper-driven process. So I get a Post-it note from Nancy in AR. And then I go and it's like, all right, so before we talk AI, let's kind of get down to this level one and let's go through the process, get the data right, security right, the process right, and then look to see, hey, are we even able to turn on a Copilot or a ChatGPT or something?
Yeah, not if you're using sticky notes.
Yeah,
Probably
exactly.
not going to work as well as it could.
It's not going to know what to reason over. So,
Right. Well, good. Well, I appreciate you being here today, Mason. And it looks like you have at least one new fan here. Perry on LinkedIn says we have the contact info for the
hey,
presenter.
Gary, nice to meet you.
Accept the LinkedIn follow or connect. So the name again, Mason Whitaker. What's the best way to find you and find your company? What are the social media channels you're most active on?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn, go and connect with me. Make sure to hit the 3 dots and do the connection. Would love to connect with you guys. It's Mason Whitaker. It's Whitaker with only 1 T. I always have to explain that. Our website for Volt is volt-technologies.com. So you can explore all the different solution offerings that our organization has and all the different industries that we focus in. And then I am active really on LinkedIn a lot, YouTube, as well as TikTok. And I think on TikTok, it's the Mason Whitaker. On YouTube, I think it's just Mason Whitaker. And yeah, those are kind of the main platforms. But definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message if you guys want to talk about digital transformation in your organization, specifically within the Microsoft ecosystem. Happy to talk with you guys.
Yep, and it's Perry asked again about the spelling. It's WHITAKER is Whitaker. And yes. I try to drop it. I dropped it in the chat on the streaming thing we're on. It doesn't let me drop it in the LinkedIn chat, but I dropped it in all the other platforms. The exact spelling, the name of the company, Volt Technologies. So look them up on social media, and we tagged them. If you're watching this on my LinkedIn channel, I've tagged them on this page as well, so you can look there, and we'll make sure to add them tag them in the comments once the recording is up as well. So very good stuff. Well, thanks for being here today, Mason. Really appreciate it. Pleasure as always. I love watching your TikTok stuff, and now that I know you're more active on YouTube, and we've been connected here on LinkedIn for a while as well. We'd love to have you back on in the future as things change so quickly that this discussion might be obsolete here in a couple months. Might be time.
I know. Let's 3 months from now, we'll see how all these speculative ideas come to fruition or not, which I think a lot of them are going to. So, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks to the audience for the great questions. We'll be back same time, same place next week with another guest to talk about tech agnostic digital transformation stuff. In the meantime, hope you have a great week, and we will